Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be working on this Drexel credenza buffet. I believe it's from the 1960s as part of their 18th century heritage collection, and let's see what we can do. I'm going to get started by taking off this hardware, affectionately called the Batwing hardware. I'm probably going to be taking this back to the restore and donating it. Not going to be reusing it today. Just using my 501 tool, prying off these little fake keyholes. I think there's a name for them. I don't know what it is. Let me know in the comments if you do. Having a little trouble with this back plate, but it'll get there. First thing first, nice and clean. I already stripped this top a couple months ago with some chemical stripper and then set it in the back of the garage, so it got pretty dusty. So just using some simple green here to get that off, along with any other contaminants that may have gotten on here in the meantime, and then rinsing off that residue with some clean water. Next, I'm going to hit it with a fan to dry things out before I start my sanding. Trying a 180 grit, and you'll see in a second it wasn't going fast enough for me, so I decided to swap that out for a 120 grit. Just open up the wood a little bit to prep it for the bleach. You can see I already tested the bleach on that drawer there, so that's kind of a preview of the look I'm going for with this whole piece. Taking it from a dark finish to a nice light finish. And here we go with the bleach. So I'm using a 2-part bleach system from Zinsser. Instructions say to take part A and saturate the surface evenly. So I'm using a foam brush here and just gonna pour a little bit out and work my way across the top. I want to make sure that everything is nice and evenly saturated so I get a nice even result with the bleach. So just going across the whole piece in a couple different directions will help me with that. Once this is applied, instructions say to let that sit for about 5 to 10 minutes before going in with your part A, while part B, while part A is still wet. And again, just applying this across the entire surface nice and evenly. And you can kind of see it getting a bit murky here on the top, and that is the bleach kind of pulling the tannins out of the wood. So looks like that's a good start. So then after letting that dry overnight, coming back, instructions say just to give it a light sanding to remove that top sort of residue from the bleach, and you'll see how that also kind of reveals this lighter surface underneath. I'm going to go ahead and do another round. It says you can do up to 3. I think. I did 2 on the drawer front and I liked how that turned out, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that with the top as well. And I forgot to record it. So this is with second round, part B over part A, and we'll let that sit overnight. In the meantime, I'm going to switch gears and start stripping off the rest of the drawers. So I already had some stripper on here, but it dried a little bit, so I added a little bit more to sort of reactivate that. And wearing gloves here. You probably should have been wearing gloves during the bleach process, so do that if you try this. And so once that stripper does its work, I'm just using my 5-in-1 tool to gently scrape off this finish, which actually came off really, really easily. It wasn't too thick. Then I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of acetone with a stiff brush to sort of get in all these little crevices and really get that finish off of here. And just wiping that down, and I'm going to hit it one more time with some acetone to just get all of that residue off there. Yeah, nice and clean. Continuing with more drawers, same process. Instead of the brush this time, I decided to use a little scrub pad. It's a little gentler than the brush I was using and easier to sort of form it around these curved edges and wipe everything clean. Then once I got all the drawers stripped, I'm going to do the same bleaching process I did on the top. Part A, let that sit for 5 to 10 minutes, and then apply part B. You also can't see it, but I put some painter tape underneath on the inside of the drawers under those holes so that the bleach didn't drip down into there. And then I let that dry overnight. The next morning I came out and noticed, some dark areas around the edges, and so I wanted to get in there with my hand sander, sort of even that out, and then also just doing the recommended sand across the entire surface. Usually, you want to sand with the grain, and some of these grain patterns are curvy and in all different directions, so I tried my best, but we'll see. I like this little hand sander thing. It looks like a mouse. All right, and then doing second round of bleach. This time I'm just gonna try this concentrated household bleach. I like that it's thicker so it doesn't drip everywhere. Like the Zinsser bleach was very watery and it kind of got all over the place. So trying this, also had to order the Zinsser bleach online. It was hard to find and it took a while to come, so I already had this, so we'll see what happens. And going back to the top, stride overnight and just doing a quick hand sand as recommended before doing another round of bleach. It wasn't as light as I was hoping for, so I'm gonna attempt to use the household bleach here as well. Just wiping off all the dust and going in with the household bleach. Same process. Nice even coverage. And then I set everything out to dry. Next, I got to work on the doors using some acetone and steel wool to scrub off the finish, which ended up working pretty well for me, so I stuck with that approach. After getting the finish off from all the larger flat areas, I used this scrub brush to sort of get in all the corners and the small areas, which worked pretty well. It's got some plastic bristles, and then on the front edge it has some steel bristles, and on the back side is a little scraper. So it's a handy little tool I picked up from Lowe's, and it helped to get all the detailed areas of these doors. And I switched back and forth with acetone and lacquer thinner. I'm not really sure what's all is in lacquer thinner. It has a very strong acetone smell, so I'm assuming it's acetone based. So there might be, obviously there's probably some other ingredients in there as well, but they both worked pretty similarly, so I kind of used them interchangeably in this process. And once the finish was off the doors, I went ahead and started the bleaching process. So after applying part A and then B and letting it dry overnight, this was the result. And the last part to remove the finish from is the body of the piece. So starting on the sides, and then I'll be working my way around the base and the other side. Again, using a variety of tools. I'm using a dish scrubby as well as my scraper and the brush that I showed you before. So all of these things in conjunction with each other and the steel wool and paper towels really help to get all of these little trim pieces with all the detailed curves and everything. So again, my process here was to apply a clean stripper, let that work, and then scrub it with the dish scrubber, and then scrape off all of the loose parts that I could get that way, and then coming back in with some lacquer thinner and the scrub brush to get the rest of it, and then wiping it off with paper towels to remove all the residue. Once I got everything I could get with the stripper and lacquer thinner, I went back in with my orbital sander just to do a final cleanup of all of these surfaces. It's generally not advised to use a sander like this on the edge banding, so I stopped and switched over to my hand sander, as well as just getting into some of these little areas that were hard to reach with the orbital sander. And this is where I really started to notice the extent of the veneer damage that was down at the bottom on this side near the base. It looked at some point there was some water damage of some sort. It bubbled in that area, and so as I'm sanding it, it's kind of just exposing the substrate beneath. I don't record it, I don't know why, but I ended up using mixture of different techniques to hide it. So I ended up using sort of acrylic paints in like a touch-up kit, as well as some like furniture markers, and then in the end you'll see as I tone the whole piece, that was sort of the brought all of the repairs together and sort of evened out the side, and you can't really tell anymore, which I was surprised by because it looked pretty bad. So toning is a great tool for that. And then finally just getting these little areas between the drawers. I decided to switch over to my detail mouse sander for this, just so I didn't have the spinning orbital that can sometimes damage these parts. It was easier to control with this stationary sander. couple days since I had done my last sand on the top, and so now I'm getting ready to do the stain. I just wanted to make sure it was a nice fresh surface for that application. And now here we are, finally to the stain. So I'm using Minwax water-based stain in the color Aged Barrel. It's kind of a gray color. Makes the wood look weathered. And I was worried about the intensity of it, so I watered it down, sort of using it like a paint wash. And so I'm going to apply this and see how I like it. I can always build it up, but I can't take it off. So that's the plan. I want to do nice long sort of sections, and that way the edges of the sections will bleed in together. I'm gonna sort of stop and wipe this down before I continue, and then work my way across the entire top. So you can see it ended up being pretty subtle, and I end up going a lot darker than this because once I did that, I figured since it was so subtle, I could do sort of a less diluted version of the stain, and so I started that on the drawers here, so it was more stain, less water in my mixture, and I ended up really liking how this looked. And then I was also thinking ahead of the fact that I was going to have to do some toning, which I do with this stain mixed with the poly, and on the side because of I do it all over, but the reason that I did it was because of the color repair that I had to do on the side, and then having to blend that in together. I knew I was going to need to tone it pretty well, so it was going to end up being darker. So that is sort of where this is where I shifted gears and started doing it a bit darker. So again, the process here is to wipe it on with a paper towel and then wipe it right back with a clean paper towel. It's one coat poly on hand. It's a very thick mixture, and it's meant to be brushed on with a fine bristle brush in a thick coat, and then you're supposed to only have to do one. But since I'm spraying this, I decided to water it down, and then I am mixing in the stain to do the toning that I've been talking about. So just, eyeballing this. I end up adding some more a bit later, but wanting to just strain that through. And you saw the gunk on the stir stick a minute ago, so it's always good to strain. And then I set up my drawers side by side, and now I'm just hitting everything with the poly. And I do several coats of this, and it builds up the color as I go along and evens everything out for a nice cohesive look. You can really see how subtle it is as I'm spraying this top. And it's good to go this light so that you can build it up. Although I did end up adding some more stain to my mixture so that it was a bit heavier on the color, and this is after several more coats. As you can see, it's much darker than it was, and honestly it's much darker than I had planned, but I ended up liking how it turned out. And so now that I've finished all the staining and top coat, I am going to install the new hardware, which is a really fun part where you really get to see the piece come together. So my plan here, I was ending up using one of the holes that were already there and then adding a third hole, and then that middle one would be covered up by the new hardware. So I used my hardware jig, which was really handy for this, especially since I could just plug a screw into the hole that I wanted to keep, and then it was giving me perfect placement. And these new hardware, I did a poll on my Instagram, and this is what everyone picked, which was honestly what I was going to pick anyway, regardless of what the outcome was, but it was fun to see everybody choosing the same one that I was wanting to go with anyway. So that wraps it up. Let's take a look at the before. I love this classic piece. I just didn't like the warmth and the darkness of the finish or the redness of the wood, the mahogany wood, so just wanted to update it a bit. And I really love how it turned out. I think this gray tone really modernizes it, and the new hardware, much better than the Batwing hardware, and I just think everything came together really nicely on this. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. See you next time.